The SDSA presents Inside the Set with Set Decor. Today we welcome set decorator Sandy Walker for the fantastic Apple TV Plus series C, the story of sightless tribal communities in a dystopian future.
Sandy, welcome.
Thank you, Jean. Thanks for having me.
This is a unique premise. How did you go about building this world?
It's not your typical futuristic project where it's very modern and high tech. We are a couple of centuries in the future. The designer wanted to take the direction of being more primitive than futuristic. We also have aspects of 2020 world, taking objects and items that would have survived a couple of centuries in the future. And we're flipping everything on its head, not using those items as intended and augmenting and implementing those items into furnishings or settings.
I think it's important to point out here that you're portraying various tribes. It's not just one village or one culture.
So we have the Alkeni tribe, which is Baba Voss and Negra. They're more primitive, more earthbound generated, more organic. And then Queen Cain's world is the Payan world, and they are much more to do with the electrical power, metals, concrete. It's more of a harsher, colder world, more sophisticated. They're sort of, if you have to put it in context, let's say the US, the Alkeni are sort of Midwest, the Payan tribe is more New York.
So you had to figure out what materials would be available 600 years after major disaster.
We did a lot of research on the internet, and we found that the number one item that would survive a couple of centuries from now was actually diapers. And then the second thing was plastics. Like you'll see a lot of plastics that we use within the sets that we sort of intertwine into the furnishings.
That gave you moments to add color because this is supposedly a visually impaired world.
Yeah, we had a great consultant. His name is Joe Strachey, and he's an associate producer on our film. And he was a wealth of knowledge. He has a whole team that trained the actors how to move and speak in a blind way, but he was really helpful for set dec and props, helping us create the world of the blind community. It came to the point where I would have Joe and his team come down to our set dec lockup in our workshop and test the items, some of the carts that we built, to see if that was actually practical for a blind person. And it also taught my crew, who was building the objects, how to put themselves into that world and think differently. I think we take for granted our sightedness. We had to basically refurbish and rebuild from scratch all the carts because we made push carts like a wheelbarrow. And in the blind community, they need one hand to feel where they're going. To them, they love backpacks, pulling carts, anything that they can use their one hand with their staff to navigate where they're going. And we were making it like sighted people. Use two hands and you push the cart. And that just didn't work. They love texture on the ground, can feel through their feet where they're going, what texture of, if it's soil or grass or a carpet or a crack in the sidewalk. Those are landmarks for them.
But you gave us visual clues, ropes down the center of the village, streets, the sort of guidelines. And they had tassels or pieces hanging from them that would touch their heads so they wouldn't even have to hold on to the rope.
So it's a tactile thing, right? The ropes were guide wires or guide ropes. They lift up their staffs and they hit the rope. So they don't have to follow the rope all the way along. Like as you'll notice, they just sort of tap just to give them guidance of, okay, I'm here now. And you're right about some of the tendrils that are coming down off that rope. I mean, it's an old village. It's been there for centuries. That rope would have been loosened up and broken down over the years.
In both villages, the homes, the interiors, it's not a lot of color inside. It's all determined by texture, isn't it?
They are more organic, earthbound, kind of a community And there are some plastics in there. There's metal, there's like rubber tires that are as work as shingles for the tops of the roofs. Kenny tribe are actually rope builders. That's why you see a lot of lashing around.
Right, because the Payan world, they are basically set in an ode of electrical dam. The Turbine Room itself, my goodness.
We actually used a location over on the island, Vancouver Island in Camel River, and it was the old LNG pulp mill plant. They were in the middle of tearing that whole plant down, and we just loved all the pipe and conduit and structures that created that degraded post-apocalyptic. It was perfect architecture for the background of that room. But that room was huge. Originally, we're supposed to build 12 turbines. It was just so big. Like, it was one of those sets that you put one thing in and it would just swallow up that one item.
And then Jean mentioned the Queen's divan in her chambers.
It was just spectacular, the satellite dish, and then all of the different colored electrical wire moved around as padding on it. But again, it looks like a nest.
Yeah, Caroline and she had the concept at the beginning of thinking that Queen Kane was trapped in a bird cage. Her chambers just sort of looked like some sort of cage. So I was kind of thinking about, like, okay, we've got to make her bed like really interesting. If she's a bird trapped in a cage, I was thinking, well, if we use electrical wires and make it like one big messy nest. From there, we just shot off, and Caroline saw this great satellite dish that we had in the back, and she says, let's put the wires in that. And then she propped it up so it's on an angle. We built the bed out of that.
Along those lines, her chair in her chambers, and then her carriage.
When we were in LNG searching around doing our survey, I went shopping in that plant because I knew they were ripping everything down. So we pulled a lot of great dressing. One of them was the crane chair, because I saw an old crane chair, but it wasn't the look that I was looking for. I wanted something more beefier, bulkier, looks more like a throne. And buyers found this great crane chair that had the joystick still on it, and pretty much everything was intact. And then we put on casters, draped it with a fur pelt, and on the back of the chair is knobs, electrical knobs, riffing off the fact that it's an old electrical plant. And of course, they communicate through knots.
That's how messages come in strands of knots, and in the hydroelectric plant is a wall of knots that is their constitution or their set of laws.
Yeah, that's in the boardroom where there's the big fire pit that's right in front of the whole Congress, and behind her is the Constitution, and she comes in and she touches the Constitution as if she's reading it before she speaks to the council.
There is a lot of outdoor shooting. We're not all interiors, but there is some incredible nature in there.
All the locations were all over British Columbia. The juxtaposition on the show is that nature, it's so vast and beautiful, and it just engulfs civilization. It's unfortunate because these people can't see what's around them, the beauty that's around them.
Although they can't see these vistas, for instance, the forest, they can feel and ascertain.
The way they navigate through this world is a lot to do with echolocation. Our consultant, Joe Strachey, came up to the rock wall location. He just snapped his fingers and could get a sense of where the trees were, knew exactly the girth, the size of those trees, just by echolocation. It's fascinating to me how they can transition and how they don't need sight to navigate and get around. I was practically breaking my ankles walking through the terrain, and he was just like gunning it. He had mentioned that he usually feels where he's going before he puts his weight on that foot. That's just adapting his senses in a different way that we don't, because we take for granted that we can see.
And that's really a very big part of the sea story. The pandemic happened hundreds of years before, and some of them at the beginning of it started with sight and then lost it.
Correct. And of course, everyone's like, well, why is their hair braided and why do they wear feathers in it? And it's the same thing. It's tactile. It's very tactile. And sure, they don't have to wear clothes, but they have to keep warm, just like us who can see. The blind community is so capable of doing everyday things that we do, as well as sports. Like there's a skateboarder that knows how to skateboard when he's blind.
Well, you were talking about their ability to create these things. The silk farm.
We had to research a lot about the process of coming from the silkworm. One of my buyers, Amber Borman, she did a fantastic job of researching and figuring out all the steps, all the processes. Props and SETDEC had a big meeting, and you make this loom, we'll make this other loom, we'll make the boiling pots and winders or the weave. The majority of the items that are in that set were made by SETDEC. And then props came in, and we had to bring Joe Strachey down with his team to teach the extras who were actually having to use the machines. Taught them like how they worked, what to do, just so it looks more authentic.
All of these places, everything's built, right? You didn't pop into a prop house and go, oh, I'll take that ancient loom over there or something.
Unfortunately, no. There was a few things that we could rent, but no, the majority, I'd say 95% of everything that you see is built.
We've seen a lot of different places in our world so far. Can you tell us a little bit about the Scavengers Space where we meet up with Boots?
Originally, it was supposed to be a plastic tribe. We built all the walls out of plastic bales. So they're old plastic bottles that have been crushed into a bale. I think they were like 400 or 500 pounds each a bale or something. It was a ridiculous amount of weight for each bale. So we were trying to figure out how to build that village without having the weight come tumbling down on an actor. Construction, I don't know how they did it. They secured all those bales so that they weren't going anywhere. And of course, we built that set, the most windiest part of BC, called Menotti Bay, which is around in Squamish. And Squamish in Inuit terms means windy. So we, of course, built this set on a windy point where there was a storm that came through. I think it was the day before we were supposed to shoot that set. Everyone had to leave because where we had the circus parked was in a gravel parking lot. The wind was lifting up that gravel and basically breaking windows on the trailers. And we had to tie on the set itself. We thought, oh God, like, is it going to survive the wind? Well, luckily it did. So all the plastic that you see on the bushes, we had to tie them with zip ties to each branch. The night before that windstorm aged that plastic even better. Mother Nature helped us out on that part.
There was the sort of mobile or these spinning things. What I thought, I thought it's a trap. You
had to do a shrine, a plastic shrine. Magra's rings were taken and put into the shrine. So that's where Hanawa had to grab them and find them and take them back. Originally, I thought those prayer wheels would be near the shrine, but we ended up placing them in the surrounding village of the plastic tribe. So it's kind of like an entry of knowing that you're entering into another tribe. Again, we tried to add texture to it by using old bottle caps and things that would have been found. The shrine itself was like 14 feet high. The roof of the shrine was made with old flip-flops, rubber flip-flops. There's things in there, trinkets that would have lasted. And actually, we got a lot of the plastics from Plastic Salvage Company that goes along the shorelines of British Columbia. And they have a couple of fishermen and people that collect old plastic that's been washed up. They're cleaning up the shorelines. We basically purchased a lot of that ocean plastic.
And along with that, I would imagine you would find things that you would share with props.
We have a really great prop master, Dean Godine, who worked on season 1, and he had a really good team. That he had a leather worker and a mold makers, and his team was incredible and veterans of the business. So we were really lucky and fortunate to have worked with him. Dean and I worked together before on a series of unfortunate events, Lemony Snicket. So he and I had a shorthand.
How big a crew did you have to have? It looks like you must have had huge to cover this.
At one point, I was signing 100 timesheets for a few weeks there. I had a really good build crew. I've worked with them on many features, and so they come from that world and they understand what it takes to build particular items. Working with different crews coming from different backgrounds, right? So you've got your feature crew and then you have your TV crew, and those two worlds sort of collided together because this show is really like a feature series is what I'm dubbing it. They want feature quality, but it's on a TV series kind of pace. Although we had both of them were sort of seeing what each one does and learning what each one does. So I think it was a good collaboration.
Here at Set Decor and the SDSA, we know what goes into what you've done in building all of the set dressing and stuff. But I think the general public doesn't always realize that first you design it and then you build it, and then it has to go to aging and teching. And I mean, there's so many steps to bring it to this worn, weathered bench or something, and that's just one piece.
We went through so much paint. We actually hired my own painters because I knew that the paint department, I couldn't keep asking them to keep painting our stuff when they had so much to do themselves. And at one point I had 15 to 20 painters on painting particular furnishings that I had to get out, and then bringing in crew to build, like the plastic tribe, for instance. It's a windy location. We couldn't afford to have anything blow away or go into the ocean or anything like that. So everything had to be tied down. We made these blankets of plastic. We used snow fencing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with snow fencing. It's basically plastic grid. And we tied with mono all the plastic bottles. So we had someone drill holes into the bottles, and then we had another person tie the bottles onto the snow fencing, and then they had to do a shake test to make sure nothing came off. And we made these 10 by 8 foot blankets of plastic. And then we just draped it over like a big pile of something or whatever. So it looked like there were stacks of plastic.
So many platforms, viewing and streaming platforms, that's where we're moving. The television has a whole new look.
This is the future, is moving into streaming. And as you see, all the movie stars, all the film stars, they're moving into the TV series. And yes, Apple TV Plus is a phenomenal company to work with, and Endeavor and Chernin, they gave us the budget in order to do it.
And into the other crafts as well. The costume design is beautiful. The way it's shot is smoky and windy and dirty and verdant. There's just all these different vistas. The whole thing is just incredible to see.
We had a very, very strong art department, meaning set deck props, costumes, hair, makeup, special effects, screens, paint, construction. We collaborated so well. It was magical.
And with all that, you were willing to go back. You've already started season 2. Is that correct?
Caroline is doing it again. And so she really wanted me to come join her again. And I was honored, and I love working with her. So I just want to say next year, season 2 is bigger than season 1.
Wow. We'd like to thank Sandy Walker, set decorator for the Apple TV Plus series C, now streaming. Thank you so much, Sandy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, SETDECOR.com.